Hey everyone, welcome to the Customer Success webinar series. I am Scott Slomba, Head of Customer Success. And with me, we have two usual suspects. We have our field CTO, Benjamin Henry, and we also have Darren Cunningham, who is our Head of Marketing. Today, we're going to be talking about migrations, a very common, popular topic lately. Ben will be driving most of the show here. His background is in migrations. He's done, he gets involved with a lot of our major customers' migrations, but also he has a history of doing this as a customer for many years. He worked with Komprise doing migrations. So lots of best practices up his sleeves that he's going to be talking about today. I noticed there's a lot of new registrants on this call, so just a little bit of background on this webinar series. A reminder that the target audience for this call is for existing customers. So even though we have a marketing person on the call, this is not a marketing pitch. It's just coming around telling you new features, new use cases, best practices, et cetera. We just want you to make most use of the product. So that's what this is all about. Before we get started, a couple logistics. If you haven't figured it out, on the right-hand side of your screen, there's you can get into full screen mode. We do want you to ask questions. It helps with the webinar. To do that, you have to get out of full screen mode, hit the question mark button, and we'll be monitoring that along the way here and trying to inject them as we can. And then speaking of questions, one question we always get is this recorded? And the answer is yes. We record all webinars and they're all posted. If you see the bottom bullet here, komprise.com/techcrunch with a K. We post all our webinars there. And that's it. Yeah, we got a lot of material, so I'm just going to turn it right over to Ben and let him get busy on this. So, Benjamin, it's all yours. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. I'll start with some quick data statistics. Some of these I actually found staggering when they were released. So in 2022, 90% of the data generated by organizations was unstructured data. Only 10% was structured. So what are we talking about there? Well, NAS versus something like databases. This is a huge flip. If we go back a couple of years, the amount of data stored in databases significantly outpaced unstructured data, but the tables have turned, and greatly. Another one here is organizations globally generated 57,000 exabytes of unstructured data in 2022. And they're actually projected this year to grow by 28% and bring that number up to 73,000 exabytes. That's just a number I have a hard time wrapping my head around. Exabytes. I mean, we're familiar with gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes. Even petabytes becomes a little hard to grasp, but exabytes, it's just one of those numbers that is like, how do you put this into relation? And one more here. So 58% of unstructured data is ever reused more than once. So a great example of that is this presentation. After I build this, after we talk about it today, I'm probably not going to bring this presentation up again in its entirety. So this is a prime example of something that I'm going to use once. I'm going to shelve it. I might use little pieces of it, but largely not use it again. So again, putting exabytes into some sort of palatable or understandable format here is the 128. So in 2021, the most common sold iPhone was 128 gigs. In 2022, it doubled in size. The most common iPhone sold was the 256 gig. Okay, moving beyond that, there's been around 2.6 billion iPhones sold worldwide since they've been on the market. So if we say all 2.6 billion phones had an average storage size of 192 gigs, that would only hold 5% of the 73,000 exabytes projected to be generated in 2023. That's just, again, a number that is just mind-boggling to me. All right, migrations. Let's get out of the statistics for a minute. Common questions for migrations that I hear a lot from customers is, does Komprise have some examples of migration plans? Can I migrate internally as well as to the cloud? Is there a way to migrate dual protocol shares? Does Komprise offer validation of the data migrated? Can migration settings be modified after I start a migration? Do audit log exists? And there's more of these. But the good news is the answer is yes. Yes to all of these and more. We handle these scenarios. If you have additional questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll try to answer them in this session. If we don't get to the session, we'll definitely follow up with you afterwards. All right, moving on. Let's talk about some of these questions in more entirety. Is the planning? Do we have examples of planning? And one of the first things I'm gonna throw out there is, the when. When should you start planning? And the answer there is as early as possible. You want to find and identify the complications, the bottlenecks, the things that are going to jam you up in your migration. You want to find those and try to identify them as early as possible. And if you can, implement workarounds. We'll talk about some of those techniques and what some of the hurdles may be there. What should be captured in this plan? Well, you definitely want to capture your sources and information about the sources, the analytics. I'm going to put a plug out there now, or a teaser for version 5. There's a ton of new analytics in the UI with version 5, and we'll actually show you some of that in here a little bit. You want to know your rules and regulations. We'll talk about that more in detail. You want to capture information about your targets, and specifically if there's differences in your sources and targets in the technology and what they do support. Some solutions support symlinks, some solutions do not, and they use proprietary stubs, not just for Komprise when you go to archive or tiered, but also if you're using symbolic links in your business operations, make sure that that's supported on the target platform. You want to know your protocols. Permissions, are you keeping the same permissions, or are you going to take an opportunity to standardize and repermission when the data lands? Is your target empty, or did something already copy data there? If it already copied data there, do you want to keep that and allow it to sync up with the source, or do you want to completely wipe it out and start over? Or do you want to keep the newest version and not have them match? Those are kind of options now. Cutover events, you want to track those things. So the cutover events are logical grouping of your shares that you want to cut over at one time. Different techniques for doing cutovers. We have the traditional outage, but now we offer something called a warm cutover. As well as your topology. This is another big one. You want to know the topology, the path your data is taking. Are you staying internal on your networks? Are you using the WAN? Are you using the WAN paired with an express route, a direct connect, a VPN, a private endpoint? You want to know what you're facing, as well as any performance bottlenecks, security appliances, WAN accelerators, IOP restrictions. So these are some of the basics, and we'll go into some more here in a little bit.
Hey, Ben, before you go on to the next slide, there was a question asking about dual protocol support.
Yes, we now offer dual protocol support. Yeah,
and I think you got to talk about that in pretty deep detail in a little bit here, right?
It's one of the things I'm going to cover it really quick, but yes, it's something that we can we'll capture who asked that question, Scott, and we'll certainly follow up with them. But yes, there are now options built in for native dual protocol share support in migration. That's probably also a second to talk about. There's two concepts there. There's dual protocol, and then there's mixed mode. Dual protocol traditionally is where one protocol sets the permissions and the other protocol observes those permissions. There's also something called mixed mode. Most storage vendors cringe when they hear this. I cringe myself, because mixed mode is where both SMB and NFS can write their own permissions together inside of the same share or export. But there's a big gotcha there. Windows and SMB will observe permissions set by a Unix client, but when you save that document again from an SMB client, it will wipe out the Unix permissions, and SMB will then set its permissions, and it can lock out the Unix user. So more on that. Glad to get into that in more detail, but that's kind of a quick glance at what the two differences are there.
Okay, and just another one popped in while you're talking is asking about warm cutover.
Yes.
And I believe you're actually going to walk through an example of that, right? Or
not today. There's more to that, but yes, there will be in one of our next webinars. I'm not sure if it's the next one or the one after, but we will cover warm cutover in detail.
Okay, so that's coming up. But yeah, we do. But we do support warm cutover. So
yes, we do. And yeah, if something that a customer wants to know more about, certainly contact your account team or CSM, and we'll schedule a session to talk about it.
And yeah, we're going to cover some of that in a focus session on what's new in 5.0. So there's some new things there that are also in the release notes.
Definitely. I'm sprinkling some of the highlights here. I'm kind of stealing Paul and everyone else's thunder a little bit, but 5.0 is out. It's kind of hard to contain it. So awesome. Migration planning. So again, we talked about source and targets. This is only a small sampling of what's out there, but it's to get your mind kind of thinking about, do you have a plan on where you're going to go? Have you already acquired the technology? Are you thinking about the different options? So again, plenty of options. Analytics. So this is a huge bonus to version 5. The analytics were always there. You might have had to capture them from a few different sources, but now we're making them front and center to help drive business decisions from a single pane of glass. So out of the box, the default analytics you're going to get from what we now call the data stores tab. So the shares tab has been replaced with a term called data stores, and that's also kind of preempting what's coming next. So by default, you will now have visibility to the share names, the share paths, the protocols, the number of items, meaning the files or objects. Oops, I might have leaned into what's coming next. The number of directories, that's huge. The capacity, free space, percentage, and amount, modifications of the data. So that's another big one too, is if you have a large amount of data being modified, that might be a question to say, what's actually happening over there? The amount of cold data, another one. The amount of cold data from a single pane of glass will let you know, hey, is there an opportunity to do something with this data before I migrate it? Can I reduce the amount of storage I'm consuming in these shares? Can I right-size things? All right, so that's a small portion of what's available from the data stores tab. And I'm actually going to give you a quick glance of the export here, but in a migration plan, this is almost 50, if not 60% of the data that you want to collect to make part of your migration plan is exportable through a single report. So here's a screenshot of what that looks like. Again, you have the share name, the site, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. You have the file server, the protocol, the capacity, again, the number of items, the directories. That's huge because there are some storage technologies that have limitations on the number of files that you can have in a given share or the number of files in certain folders. This kind of lets you know ahead of time that you could be planning for some different hurdles in your migrations. Okay. All right, so I said I'll kind of give you an idea of what
sorry, I was on mute. Before you get going, there was another question asking about share security groups.
Yes. So there's two different areas there in the shares. You have your share permissions, and then you have your ACLs. So if we have any clarification on that question, I could certainly go into more detail.
Yeah, no, it's just asking what about them?
Sure. Okay. So, yeah, if we can get a clarification on that, definitely interrupt me again, and I can certainly kind of redirect that. Sure. All right. So let's go here to share screen. I'm going to share a workbook out here. So an example of what I use when I look at setting up for a migration, this is rather dense. It's going to scroll to the right a lot. I capture a lot of data. But again, the first set of information you see here is the data that I can capture right from a single export. I don't have to get it from 5, 10, 50 different sources. If I scroll on here, some of the other things I want to capture, my target information, whether I'm doing a standard or advanced migration, that'll make sense when I go through the demo of setting up a migration. The migration subtype, whether I'm doing a single source to many targets to a single source. The target status, is it empty? Does it already have data? Do I want to keep that data? What is my end result of the migration? Again, is it keep latest version? Do I have an undecided value yet that's out for review? Do I want it to exactly match the source and purge anything in the target or destination that doesn't match the source? What kind of cutover do I want to do? My permissions, am I copying them or am I going to re-permission on the other side? What is my cutover event? Where am I migrating over? My topology, whether I've got security appliances in my way, whether I've got IOP restrictions on any of the sides, whether I've got bandwidth restrictions, and am I going to leverage Komprise Hypertransfer in this process? So again, a quick sample, more than glad to send this out to anybody. Use it as a building block to build your own migration plan for sure. All right, let me come back here to our presentation.
Yeah, there's another one that popped in. Someone's asking about, we just want to migrate data. However, analysis is also accounted in the license. Is there a license available to just migrate data without using the analysis? Why?
Yes, actually, that's another one worth clarifying. Is there's two different types of analytics. And let me go back to that slide because I think I actually forgot to cover that. So I did. So out of the box with Migrate Only, you get the analytics that are on the left-hand side. Then we also offer what is called Deep Analytics. Deep Analytics is a searchable, centralized index of your data and its metadata that introduces the ability to search and filter on directory paths, file names, modified dates, access dates, file types, extensions, file sizes, groups, owners, and even lets you tag data. Those reports are also exportable, but customizable and savable. So two different kinds. Left-hand side, built in out of the box, included with your migrations. Right-hand side, that is actually the full license that's available. And we can actually talk about that. Maybe if we can send out there's a pros and cons, or I think there's a comparison between the two, Scott. So maybe it makes sense to send that out to the person that's my question.
We'd probably also want to connect you with your account team to walk
Yeah.
through all the different licensing options and what would make the most sense for your particular use case. So I'll be sure to connect the dots here.
No, that's great. Thanks. I jumped ahead. I forgot to even cover the deep analytics side. So thanks for bringing that question up for whoever asked it.
Actually, two other questions popped up.
Yep.
So can we have a presentation and sample of this workbook available for download?
Yes, we can certainly do that.
Yeah. And then one more here. Could you kindly share that migration sample Excel document? Okay.
Yeah, more than glad to share that Excel document.
Okay. And I know Darren, I know the video is recorded. Do we put the slides up as well? Or maybe we should on this one. This looks like a lot of.
We do.
For this.
We do. It sounds like though I think we could probably put a link to the download on Freshdesk doc site.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, we have all kinds of artifacts and whatnot that we tie to these webinars. So we'll be sure to capture these requests and place them accordingly.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to see all the questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. All right. Sorry, Ben.
No, it's great. So we'll get into the next part. That's always a challenge that I see from customers is it's not something that's in the forefront. It's kind of one of those things that that gets brought up by legal or compliance when they say, "Hey, what about consider your rules and regulations before you start migrating?" And an example of rules versus regulations. Rules are usually internal retention policies, legal hold, disaster recovery, making sure you got both sides of the equation. Regulations, that's typically a governing body. You want to make sure that if you have any regulations that govern the position of your data, like Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, MA201, GXP, GDPR, just some of those examples that may apply to your organizations. Topology, I talked about it before. Let's talk about it again. Knowing your topology, what your data is going across or through. And of these three pictures, I know where I want my data to flow. But think about it. There are conditions where you're taking unnecessary hops or you're being routed to different locations and you may not know that. So understand that up front. Do basic trace routing, source to target. Is that clean, or all of a sudden are you using 28, 29, 30 hops to get your data where you want it to go? Congestion, bottlenecks. Are you looking at security appliances that you could whitelist to actually use the express lane? Are there WAN accelerators that are trying to do read-aheads in a migration? And read-aheads in a migration and WAN accelerators don't play well together. Go around them. Jump in the express lane. Yeah, I know it's a time-lapse photography, but make it look fast, but that's where you want to be. You want to be in a position where you can just send the data down the wire and get it to its destination.
I just want to comment, Ben, that there's we did 2 webinars on performance alone, and if you go back to the TechCrunch page, we have all the previous webinars. Look for the performance ones, and Ben goes into deep detail on the different topologies and the things to consider and common roadblocks and all that stuff. Before you get going, another question popped up. Sure. It is, I think I can answer this one, but I'll let you run with it, Ben. Can we have multiple plans so we can have different rules for different shares? And I believe what you're asking about is a tiering plan.
Okay, it definitely sounds like a tiering question.
Migration, and the answer is yes. Within a plan, you can have multiple groups. Each group can have its own set of shares, and that group can have its own set of rules. Policies applied to those shares. Yes.
Yep. You got it. And that was perfect and spot on, because here we are at the tiering.
Slide. Good segue.
Tiering is another question.
There was also a question about migration only license, and we do have that available. Yes. So it's something you should speak to your account team about as a follow-up.
Yeah, we'll connect. We'll connect you with your account team.
Yep.
Excellent. Tiering and archiving. Some customers want to call it tiering. Some customers want to call it archiving. Some actually have a definition for both. So I just call it tiering and archiving. A big question is when? Should I do it before? Should I do it after? A lot of that is really around time constraints. But even before the time constraints is going back and look at the analytics. Look at the basic analytics. Look at the deep analytics. Use it to unlock unrealized savings. Do you need to take all that data with you? Can you archive the cold data? Do you have the time to do that? And if you do, you'd be amazed at how much your storage reduction or your storage spend will drop when you move the data to the right tier, right class of storage. Do you have hardware refresh cycles coming up? Are you doing those before or after the migration, or is that part of the migration? Same thing. If you haven't purchased the hardware, look at your cold data. Do you have the ability to reduce your cold data and turn around and leverage what you were going to spend on new storage and look at something like all flash? It's amazing to see. And again, this is something that was amazing as a customer. I did this. We had the time. We reduced everything by 65% globally across the enterprise for cold data. We actually took those savings, turned around, and put everything on all flash. And Scott, we started that project, was it almost 5 years ago? And that's when flash was just starting to become semi-affordable. But we took the savings, put it all in flash, and we had kind of an unknown result, which was all of the tickets that our operations teams were getting around slow share, slow performance, that all went away. It was one of those things that happened a couple months later. We evaluated our ticket counts, and it was just, it's one of those like, this really did work. Wasn't expecting this.
Well, and not only the performance, but later on, when you did a massive amount of migrations, and you significantly reduced your risk because you had significantly less data to move. And
yes,
migrations are a very timely event. So the faster you can do whatever, you cut over or baselining, whatever, just significantly reduces your risk, which was huge.
Yeah, I mean, you're moving 1K files at that point, the links versus moving the actual data. When we're talking about imagery, that I mean, you're talking 100 meg, 100 gig, depending on what the study was, files. So we're talking about petabytes of data in one location. Again, that was just imagery, sending those 1K files versus sending the 100 gig files. It was amazing to see how much that cut down on our time to cutover. All right. Another thing to consider is, do you have any consolidations, mergers, acquisitions, divestiture? Again, leverage the analytics to help guide you on how and when and what you want to do with that data. Okay, we talked about the when, but what about the where? What can I use to tier or archive my data? Well, a lot, actually. You can go on-prem, and on-prem you can leverage an on-prem object store, or you can choose a lower cost or a lower tier of NAS. It doesn't have to be a lower cost or lower tier, but you can use, the point is, you can use NAS as well to send your data to as an archive or tier. In the cloud, object storage, single vendor, multi-vendor, you can add just about as many buckets as you want, and you can be as creative on where you're sending data based on the cost. But in addition to that, for AWS and Azure, you can actually put time policies to say, when my data lands, it's going to land in a hot tier to be readily accessible if somebody wants to recall. But then after 60 days, 100 days, 365 days, you can actually reclass that storage automatically to take the data and make it colder. And you can eventually put it in an archive tier within those cloud providers if you so choose. All right. Communications plan. This is one that I see that's kind of on the fly a lot, but I want to talk about it for a second. And it's about communicating your plans from the very beginning, during the migration, and especially during the cutover events. Is you want to be detailed, but also brief at the same time. And a way I can kind of describe this is, you've got a subject line in your email. You give like a traffic light, red, yellow, green. What's the status? Is everything good? Green. A few minor complications, we're working through it. Yellow. Red, full stop, something happened. That lets individuals know right from their phone. They don't have to dive into the email. They can tell you what's going on. If you look through your email, you just see green, green, green every couple hours. You know what? I'm not going to read the details. But in the body of the email, give a brief statement of where you are. That's the first section. And then below that, dive into the details. And if you do have a problem, put a problem statement in there so you're not generating unnecessary phone calls when you might be in one of those sessions, troubleshooting and huddling. And next thing you know, your phone's ringing off the hook because VP, CIO, someone's calling you and they need an update. Make it very clear so that they can get everything they need from one email. Migration overview, 10-step plan. So you got your migration configuration, your initial iteration, your subsequent iterations. You prepare for your final iteration. Different techniques for SMB versus NFS, stateful connections. Remember, anybody who has an existing connection stays connected until you kick them out. It's like a lifeguard blowing the whistle, everyone out of the pool. NFS, stateless. As soon as you make the change in the export rules, done. Nothing else required. Run your final iteration, review your reports, remove all access to the source, grant users and applications access to the destination, redirect them, whether it be through DFS, DNS, different path name, whatever it might be, mark your migration complete. So let's get into an actual quick demo of how you can set up a migration in version 5. So this is the UI, some color changes here. We'll talk about more of those in detail later on. I'm going to hit add migration. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to choose my source share. I'm going to say it's going to be an SMB share. I'm going to say I want the entire share. I can drop down advanced. I can choose what my migration protocol is going to be. Again, we talked about dual protocol. Which one's setting the permissions? Is the source read-only? Well, why would I have a read-only source? Think snapshots. You can actually use snapshots as part of your migrations. And do I want to preserve the A time on the source? Typically, yes, but not all the time. That would be off if you're coming from a snapshot, because that's typically read-only. Choose my destination. I'll pick something here at random, another SMB share. I want the entire thing. And now we have this migration type selector. And in the migration type selector, under standard migration, that's 2 use cases. Standard migration, what it's saying is it's going to make the target match the source, no matter what. It will also now let you migrate into a non-empty directory, nothing special. If this directory wasn't empty, there'd be a caution here saying, hey, you know what? We found data in the target. Do you want this to match the source? Because we'll go through and sync them up. If you don't, then consider using the next option, keep latest version. That will let you keep data on the target that doesn't match the source, but this will also set you up to perform a warm cutover. Again, we'll cover warm cutovers in more detail in another session. There, I get more settings about my migration. Do I want to bring the A time to the destination? Do I want to migrate my ACLs? If this is where you would turn off, if you're saying, you know what, I want to take an opportunity to standardize everything and I want to use new permissions on the other side for my data, my files and folders, turn this off. When you set up your target, you set the new permissions over there. So as the data lands, all the new ACLs will match what you want. In this case, I want to copy them. And I do want to validate my transfer. This is a big one, especially for regulatory bodies. They want to know, did you do what you said you were going to do? If you validate the transfer, it will not copy the data if the validation fails. But we also go on to log that. So let me click next. Up here, you'll see the audit log location. Every iteration, every single action taken, it's dumped to your audit log location. So you can package that up and make that as part of your change control or submit it to the regulatory body to say, yes, we did exactly what we said we were going to do. All right, let me get back to our slides here because we are running short on time.
Ben, there's a pretty loaded question, but I think it's a good one and kind of relevant to what you just talked about. So check this out. So a sync, entire copy from a candidate source, NAS, to a target one has already been done with non-comprised tool.
Yes.
Do we have to physically delete the target if we only want at first phase to only run analytics for mapping purposes on the source? The migration decision.
Yeah, if you only want to run analytics, even if you wanted to resynchronize them, you don't have to delete the target. You can go through and you can run analytics, doesn't change anything. But if you want to then resynchronize that to say, you know what, I'm going across a high latency, low speed link. I don't want to have to recopy all this data. You can leverage Komprise during that standard migration option. You'll just say, yep, I see there's data already there. I accept that. Now synchronize them. That is an absolute possibility. And my possibility, that's what we offer now.
And there's one other quick question here. And did anyone so far reach out to use a block storage migration use case?
So block storage is more of your SAN environments. Komprise is geared towards unstructured or NAS data.
And then another question, which is very, very important, is there a checksum kind of log available as part of validation?
Yes, so that audit log. So what we do is if the file does not pass its validation, either it's checksum or it's hash, it will not copy it and it fails the file. If file is success, that's proof that the validation succeeded.
Yeah, very important. A lot of tools don't do this. So very important. Okay, that's it for questions.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, some great questions. Key takeaways. Again, can't emphasize enough. Plan early. Leverage your analytics. Unlock the unrealized savings and help drive business decisions. Communicate often and to everyone involved. Partner with your internal teams to understand the topology, maybe even get some help to avoid those bottlenecks before you run into them. ACE, Assessment of Customer Environment, is a program here within Komprise. You can contact your account team, your CSM. That program or practice will let us help you identify these bottlenecks before you start running your migrations. Another one, key takeaway, SMB, stateful. Remember, if there's existing connections that are not terminated, those connections can still affect change while you're trying to do your cutover. NFS, stateless. Change the export rule, done, easy. This talks about the ACE assessment. I did talk about it briefly, so we're running short on time here, so I'll continue on.
That's also in previous sessions too. When we talk about performance, the ACE is talked in more detail. So
yep,
we got
awesome.
that covered.
And then a few extras. Everything you can do in the UI is API accessible. We do have some sample scripts available on the API usage and ways you can introduce automation to help with your migrations. Komprise can not only do unstructured data, but also object data. We can handle the migration of your object stores from on-prem to cloud, cloud back to on-prem, on-prem to on-prem, cloud to cloud. Those are all use cases for migrating objects. Again, account team, CSM, schedule a demo. We'll talk about it. And the new reports, this is big. So in version 5, there's a well, there was a reports tab, but we've added 5 baked in reports. Migration summary. We've got orphan data, potential duplicate data, showbacks, and a list of all your users. All right, Scott, back to you.
Okay, as I mentioned, these everything's recorded, and we stick it in the TechCrunch site within the Komprise website, as well as actually, if you go to the Freshdesk front page portal, there's links there as well. Let's see, the next upcoming topic. Actually, Darren, you might know better than me. I think the next one is it 5.0 or?
Yeah, we're going to now that the 5.0 release is out there. Many of you are already working with us to move to it. There's some exciting new functionality, so we're going to do a bunch of deep dive sessions on what's new in 5.0.
Okay, and then final plug is for the customer success managers. Please reach out to your CSM if you have any further questions that we have not answered or answered completely, and we'll either answer them directly or get you connected with the right folks to do that.
Awesome.
Great questions. Thanks for your time.
Benjamin, any final thoughts, departing thoughts before we wrap?
Good luck with your migrations. Plan early, plan often, and don't hesitate to loop us in if you have any questions or want to talk about how to set up your migrations for success.
Oh, actually, there was a request to repeat one of the answers of the questions. Can we proceed with deltas only without recopy the entire source, although the sync copy was done with a non-Komprise migration tool? Yes.
Yep. I know exactly where that question is going. The answer is yes. That would be a standard migration. You can proceed with just doing the deltas and not have to rebaseline, reinitialize that target share. Yes, you can do that.
All right. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to your CSM if you want to dig deeper, ask more questions. We're here for you.
Thanks, Ben. Great stuff.
Thanks everyone for your time today.
Thanks, everyone.